Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. This is Peter Frank and I'll be leading our training today. We'll be looking at planning midweek and festival services with Lutheran Service Builder. Now this will be a complete overview webinar, so we'll be covering all the main aspects of Lutheran Service Builder. Again, my name is Peter Frank. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing for Church Supplies here at Concordia Publishing House. My contact information is on the screen. You're always welcome to send me a note and ask any questions that you have. And the best way to get a hold of me is email, although my phone number is also on there too. Now, I'm not in my office as much as I'd like, but that does go directly here. So I've been with our organization for over 10 years now. I've been involved with our software for over 5, and with Lutheran Service Builder specifically for about a year and a half now. So I am not the be-all, end-all expert of Lutheran Service Builder because there are many more who have been with it since the very beginning, but I work with those guys, and so I've been working on this for a while and have led many trainings. We do about a monthly training just to show some different aspects of Lutheran Service Builder. So a few housekeeping items before we get too far. First off, I'm planning for about 50 minutes for presentation, about 10 minutes for question and answers at the end. I usually go over on the presentation side and cut the question and answer side short, just because there's always more than enough to cover. But I do ask that you ask questions throughout, and as you ask them, they'll show up in a queue over here, and I can pay attention to that. In some cases, I can even answer it as I go. Most of the time, it just lets me know how many questions I have to answer, and so I have a better idea on when to cut the presentation short. Now, we are recording this webinar, and so we will share this after the fact. If you are one of those who are watching the recording, thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry you couldn't be here live, but for those of you who are live, I'm glad you're here and can participate and ask questions as we go. So a couple things about Concordia Publishing House. We are the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and have been since 1869. We're about 148 years in and still going strong. We're always making new and different products to serve the church to help share the gospel. So that is why we are here. Lutheran Service Builder is part of that mission. So Lutheran Service Builder is a PC-based software that allows churches to quickly and easily plan services, create custom service folders, export presentations, and also conform with copyright requirements. Now, a little bit about the history of Lutheran Service Builder, if you're not familiar with it. It started out as an idea during a seminary class assignment. It was a worship planning assignment, and Bob Lael, the seminarian, back in 2004, thought there's got to be another way or better way to plan. And he couldn't find any, so he developed it. And basically, he built Lutheran Service Builder to be a search engine for the hymnal, and it just went from there. So you can watch the whole story of how Lutheran Service Builder got started at our website, lutheranservicebuilder.com. There's actually 3 videos, and it goes from the very beginning all the way to where we are today and where we're looking ahead in the future. So we released Lutheran Service Builder shortly after Lutheran Service Book was released in 2006. And the software is currently being used by about half of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, whereas the Service Book is being used by around 80%. So wide adoption rate. Lutheran Service Builder is a great add-on to having that service book in your congregation. Now, we are presently updating Lutheran Service Builder to be web-based right now. Like I mentioned before, it's only available on the PC. But in 2018, we'll be launching the online version, and that'll be going out to our congregational field testers right after the first of the year, and then roll out to all customers in the second quarter and to all new customers in the third quarter. So this is a great time to get started. Start with Lutheran Service Builder 2 and learn it and be ready to go for the online version. So that is still to come. Now, as I started planning for this webinar, as I do for all webinars, I have this idea of who would be attending this. So my assumptions about you are that you are new to Lutheran Service Builder. This is an overview training, so we're not going to get real far into the weeds, although there will be some new things I'm sure you can pick up if you're not new to Lutheran Service Builder. I assume that you've had informal training at best. We haven't had a host of training over the past few years. This last year has been more than ever before, I think, as we prepare for the online version. I'm assuming you're eager to get more out of Lutheran Service Builder, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. And I'm also assuming you're very busy. So these are some pretty standard assumptions that I make most of the time, but being very busy is consistent across the board. Anyone who works in the church knows that there is no end to the work available, so I don't have to stretch too hard to guess that you're busy. So thank you for being here. If you need to step away to take care of something more important, I completely understand. We are here to support your ministry. This certainly doesn't replace what you're trying to do. It just makes it easier. All right, so before we get too far, I do have a couple questions for you to help me validate some of my assumptions. I'm going to put a few poll questions out there. First, just to see what kind of roles we have, I'm going to launch this first one here. Let's see if that will go out. My audience view isn't updating. I'm hoping that it's showing. Okay. It seems to be, even though I can't see it out there, it seems to be working. So we'll get the responses as we go. Looks like we've got church administrator as the #1 role there. Very good. All right, then I'll close that. I'll launch my next one. Pardon me looking off screen here. I've got multiple monitors. All right, the next one, are you currently using Lutheran Service Builder in your congregation? Wow, my audience view is taking a long time. Sorry for the discussion. It doesn't actually change anything on you. All right, looks like we've got just about everybody who's attending using it. And then lastly, what would you consider your Lutheran Service Builder skill level to be? And got a variety of options there. That just helps me understand how detailed I should get today. All right, looks like we're mostly at the intermediate stage, so that's good to know. All right. We'll go ahead and close that up. Very good. Well, thank you very much for answering that. That always helps me get a better understanding of who's attending live. All right, so the goals for today. Learn the core features of Lutheran Service Builder by planning a service. We'll touch on all of those core things, but we'll really dig into a few key aspects of special services. That's where we'll spend the most of our time, planning a festival worship service with custom elements quickly and efficiently. So by the time we're done, you should be able to do that. And then finally, to export a simple service folder that can be printed and used for Sunday or for, I should have changed that to a special service, festival service. So we're going to plan Thanksgiving, and that's a unique service. We've had this request come into our support lines a number of times over the last few weeks, so this is very timely. We'll set the standard worship elements and add some custom worship elements in there. And then we'll prepare the service for print and show how you might do things a little bit differently, because if you're not on a typical Sunday service, you might have some additional changes. We'll talk about copyright management a little bit at the end. We won't spend too much time on that, but I will want to touch on that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to Lutheran Service Builder. And I have to be careful that I don't pay too much attention to my audience view, because that doesn't seem to be right. But if you find that it's not tracking with what I'm saying, please do let me know. So as Lutheran Service Builder customers, I'm sure you're familiar with this home screen, but for those of you who are not, this is the first view you get when you open up Lutheran Service Builder. And if you are brand new and haven't started, you won't really have anything over here on the right for a recently opened service, but you will have upcoming services. What we're talking about today are days that kind of fall outside of the church year, and in some instances, some of them will be. But when we look at the calendar, you'll kind of see that. You'll see, we're in November, December. Let's get to November. You see, on November, you've got here mostly Sunday services, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th Sundays after Pentecost, and the last Sunday of the church year. Now you do have a couple other things. All Saints Day is November 1st, and Andrew the Apostle is that commemoration is on the 30th. Now, chances are, in my experience, I haven't seen this, chances are you will not be having a service on the 30th. You might on the 1st, although that's unlikely. What you do when you have a service like this in the church year that falls on a non-Sunday, oftentimes it's observed on that Sunday. It's within the octave of I'm drawing a blank, of the day of the church year. So, like, for example, Pentecost 22, 22nd Sunday after Pentecost. If you were doing a service yesterday, you could have planned to observe the 22nd Sunday after Pentecost, use those propers. But see, if you go to the Feast or Festival and drop that down, you could also observe All Saints' Day. And I think in most cases, most LCMS churches observed All Saints' Day yesterday because the day before All Saints' Day is Reformation. And so when that falls, in the middle of the week, it makes a lot of sense to do on one week or one Sunday Reformation and the next All Saints' Day. That's traditionally how I've seen it done and how my church did it, and many others I know. So you would select All Saints' Day, and as you begin planning the service, it would use the propers for that. We'll jump in there real quickly, because I want to show as a differentiation what non-church calendar events have. So we'll just go Divine Service Setting 1, choose that for our order of service, and click OK. Now, if you're new to Lutheran Service Builder, this is your service planning mode. Once you select a service setting, Divine Service, then it puts the order of worship here, and we'll look at that in a minute as we get into Thanksgiving. But I want to highlight one thing real quick, is that when you have selected a day that is not observed on that day of the church year, so for example, like we just did All Saints on Sunday, when you go to one of the propers, so in this case Holy Gospel, you've got the default Holy Gospel, which is for All Saints' Day, and then you have other commemorations like Reformation Day, and then you have that day in the church year, so the 22nd Sunday after Pentecost. You have all these options, but your default is based on the day that you selected. So going back to the calendar, when I click here, you still have All Saints' Day being separate. That's the feast that we're celebrating, the festival or occasion. You select from there. Now, as we get into something like Thanksgiving, 23rd of November, we go there, that's Thursday. Now, some churches won't have services on Thanksgiving Day. In fact, many won't, but I know many do, and it provides a great example of this kind of out of the ordinary service. It's not a day in the church year. It's a federal holiday, but it's not historically observed by the church, partly because it's a North American holiday. But I know many churches still celebrate it, or observe it, I should say. So when you click on the 23rd of November, you're going to get the default feast or festival or occasion as the 24th Sunday after Pentecost. So when you click on that, that's not really accurate, but Builder's trying to find something within the octave and picks the one that makes the most sense. Well, in the same way, the last Sunday of the church year is not one that you would traditionally use on a Thursday of Thanksgiving either. So you could choose none and build your own service from there, and I know some will do that. What I would recommend is looking, at least in this case, for other occasions. So if you click down below under occasions, you've got wedding, funeral, Christian education, day of national or local tragedy, day of Thanksgiving. That sounds like a pretty good one for us. There's also harvest observance, mission observance, anniversary of calendar, anniversary of congregation, or day of supplication and prayer. Day of Thanksgiving is what we're going to go with today. So that is a separate set of propers, which is appropriate for Thanksgiving Day, although it is not on the church year, or part of the church year. So that's one way to do that. As we'll look again at Advent midweek services in a little bit, that'll be a little bit different as well. So we'll go ahead and plan this service. And you've got a number of different orders of service to choose from. Now, typically during these trainings, I select Divine Service Setting 1. but there are many other options in here. You'll see down here seasonal services: Ash Wednesday, Passion Sunday, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter. Those will get you through Holy Week, certainly, but during these irregular ones like Thanksgiving, there's not really a specific one to choose. So if your congregation is celebrating the Lord's Supper, then I would recommend choosing one of the divine service settings. If you are not, then an appropriate one would be the service of prayer and preaching. So that is a great service for any occasion when the Lord's Supper is not being celebrated. But I think especially for Thanksgiving Day, that works as well. So we'll go ahead and select that for right now to show what that looks like. So I'll click OK. And you'll notice that it's a lot smaller than a typical divine service, partly because it just has the core elements of that. Now, you'll see here that there is a place at the very beginning for hymn, opening versicles, Old Testament canonical readings from the Holy Scriptures. So the readings have a few different options there that are tied in with Thanksgiving. Now, actually, as I look at this, I may switch over. We have spots for all the propers, but I think it might make a little bit more sense. In my practice, I did divine service setting, and I realized that most churches may, or I shouldn't say most, many churches will not celebrate the Lord's Supper, but I think I will go and plan as if we were, just because it highlights and gives me a few more options for hymns on there. So we'll go back to divine service setting 1. You've got the hymn of invocation there. And that is traditionally not the hymn of the day, which shows up first on our suggestions. So the first suggestion that we have is the hymn of the day: "We praise you, O God." Now, what I would recommend is looking at the info of the hymn of the day. That usually gives you a place to see the different topics. Now, during the any service that has propers, you will be able to see suggested hymns for the readings. Now, as you get into Day of Thanksgiving, for example, there's another section within the hymnal that works especially well for selecting hymns, and you'll see that "We Praise You, O God" is the first one. Under topics, it's called Harvest and Thanksgiving. Now, you can also browse that within the hymnal, within Lutheran Service Book, and as you go down, let's see here, where are we at? A little bit farther. Oops, I think I might have passed it. I can also search for it. So Thanksgiving will show all of the different hymns in there. So like prayer and Thanksgiving. You can also just select Harvest and Thanksgiving, click search, and that'll pull all of those up from those topics within the hymnal. So for our hymn of invocation, I have selected ahead of time, "Come ye thankful people, come." And I'll just drag that over there, and then as I look ahead at some of these other ones, hymn of the day, we can go straight to the suggestions, double click it as another way to select it. We can go down to distribution hymns and select a few more. So like 893 is the one that I had. If I go right in here and type 893, it'll come up. And then lastly, the last one I want to say, "Give thanks with a grateful heart." I can just, oops, click back over there and type "Give thanks." And there it is, "Give thanks with a grateful heart." So 4 different ways I've just showed there of selecting hymns. There's a variety of other ways you can do that. So you can search under the other suggested hymns, which comes from other CPH resources that are suggested for that day, and also the LCMS Commission on Worship determined many of them. So that's another way. As you're searching, you could search for different hymn or different scripture text and what ties in with that. So maybe your pastor has selected a different reading for the day that's not part of the Day of Thanksgiving propers here. you could search in that way to find an appropriate hymn. So those are many different ways. It's a little bit different than on a standard Sunday where you have the set readings, the hymn of the day, all of that is selected, and you have a little bit more flexibility here as you're on a festival day or a special occasion in the church. All right, let's look at a few other things like custom elements. So if you because it's a different service, you might do things a little bit differently than you normally do. So we'll go up to My Worship Resources. That's the fourth icon on the Home Actions. And under Common Elements, we're going to create a new one. We're going to call this one As We Gather. So let's say you wanted to create a special Thanksgiving message and include this. You could do it straight from the, there we go. You could do it straight from the your Microsoft Word, your word processor, or you could create a common element here, and in this case we're calling it As We Gather. So for whatever reason, I'm having some trouble clicking on here. Apparently my computer is locking up. Let me try that again. There we go. I know what I did. I created a new category. I didn't create a new element. That's my fault. Let me go back and delete that. I'll show you what I did here. You have two new options, and if I look closer, I'd see that one new was for a file and one new was for a folder. We want the one new for a file. There we go. As We Gather. And now we can paste in some copy here. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in this specific Thanksgiving message, and I'll paste that there, and we'll go ahead and save that. And you can always reuse these too, so if you just have your As We Gather and you want to put in a special message with each service, you could do that. We'll go back into the Planning the Order service, go up to the very top, and click Insert. Oops. This time my computer is being slow. Insert, and then we'll go down to the bottom. Yep, there you go. My microphone's in the way. And there's my As We Gather. And this talks about gratitude and how we as Christians express thanks. So I'll drag and drop that. Oops. This is the problem with having a giant microphone. Drag and drop that there. There we go, As We Gather. So now when we go here to this next tab, Preparing a Bulletin, oops, you can see that that starts off first. So that's one way of adding a custom element to the equation. Another one, let's go here to My Worship Resources. Let's say because it's a Thanksgiving service and you're celebrating communion, and you may have some guests or visitors in your church, you may want to put in a communion statement. Well, in the same way, you would go in here and click New, and you can call that Communion Statement, and put this in, and we'll copy all of that and paste it. There we go. And save that. So we could add that in there. The other way you could do that, we'll look at two options and show what the difference is in appearance. Again, with special occasions like this, you may want to include helps for those visitors. So we'll go here, Service of the Sacrament, and we'll right-click and do Insert, and we'll go down here to the bottom, and there's our communion statement. We could include that right there. Now what you could also do is right-click, Insert, and select a rubric. Now if we put a rubric in here, that gets you that stylized red text. Now the one thing to be careful of here is that you only have so much space that you can put in. I forget exactly how many characters it is, but I can tell you that it doesn't look good if there's more than one. And also line breaks are the thing that you can include. Now you can include multiple ones if, like you see here, this starts getting really long. So we'll just do a partial option of that. And I'll jump in here back into the bulletin planning view. And as we scroll down, So there's the difference you can see here. So one would be right in there, and it kind of looks like it might be read out loud. And I know some churches will do that, especially on a day when there might be many guests. The other way just looks like a rubric, a direction for the worship, not to be read out loud, but to provide some additional context or information for somebody who is not normally at worship. So both of those are good options, and really something that you want to consider as you're planning out a special service. Now, another thing you might want to look at is as you're adding an offering, adding a rubric in here, so there's offering there. Adding a rubric that says something along the lines of, our guests are not expected to provide an offering, this is for our members, or something like that, however you want to put it. Certainly you would not be opposed to a guest providing an offering, but that might make people feel a little bit more comfortable. So those are some of the things that you might want to consider that are not typically put in on a regular Sunday service. All right, let's do another service for midweek, and I'll show some different things that you want to look at. So we'll go back to the calendar. We're going to go to December this time, and we're going to click on December 6th. So it's right after the first Sunday in Advent. Now, if you look at your list of occasions in the church year, you have the first Sunday in Advent, or the second Sunday if you're going to work ahead. Now, there's not a midweek service there, and if you go to occasions, there's not going to be a midweek service there either. Now, there are many different options out there for you. There's different programs that are produced. CPH has produced some in the past. I think we've got some coming up in the future, where they would be a thematic series of Advent services. You could do that. You could write your own, in which case you would select none. And when you go to select none and plan this service, you choose an order of service, and most likely it might be something along the lines of service of prayer and preaching. Click OK. You could fill in the gaps, so you choose the hymn. You have like the opening versicle for Advent. You could select that. So you can go in here and go to suggestions and see there for the first time there's no suggestions because there's no propers. There's no idea of what's going on. And you could type in Advent and it'll show many different options. So Advent of our King. If you go to info, you can see that that's just in the Advent topics. You can also go to browse and just view right through this whole Advent section. So that makes some things easier for you. As you go into readings, there are no readings assigned. There's no propers, therefore there's no readings. So what you can do is if you have readings planned, you can, I'm copying off a screen and just pasting it in here. You can choose a reading, so like Psalm 122, if you wanted to put that in there. If you wanted to insert another reading, we can go in here and Old Testament. Oops. Let me paste that in here. Whoops. Insert. Where did that go? Well, I apologize. I thought I could just go and insert the reading right there. There's the one reading, and yeah, well, I apologize. See, this is where the best laid plans, I tested this the other day and I added multiple ones in, and now I'm forgetting how I did that. So that's when my coffee starts to wear off for the day. Thank you for your patience in here. We could always go in and add a different worship element to it. So if I go in here, yeah, I won't spend too much more time on it. There's other ways of doing that, but I'm going to have to go double check that when you add multiple readings to it. So there's that. Then the main thing here is that I wanted to show, which I did, that you can type in any specific reading. So we did like Isaiah 2, 1 through 5. If we had changed that to 3 through 5, it would automatically change all of that and narrow it down for you. And that's the key, because where I'm going next is that if you're using a separate tool to kind of guide your worship, so like here, this is from Creative Worship, one of our other projects, where it puts together an Advent midweek service for you. In this case, the theme put on the light, you've got the thematic imagery, you've got your own As We Gather. It'll give you suggested hymns as well as suggested worship elements, including readings. So there's the prayer of the day, there's the Old Testament reading, that's where I got Isaiah 2, 1 through 5 from. You can use this to kind of guide your study, guide your service planning. Now, the great thing about Creative Worship is that in addition to having all of this planned out for you, it also creates the builder files for you. And so this is an example of what an Advent midweek service looks like here in Creative Worship with all of these different tools. There's what's called an LSBX file. When I click on that and download it, then I open that file up in Lutheran Service Builder, it will give me that option to add that service. And the title of the service, Advent Midweek 1. When I go to plan that service, here are all my different elements, and here are multiple readings. So you can see there, that's how we've added that in. Now, this is a separate order of service. It's not one of the divine services out of the hymnal, but it follows that order of service nicely. So it can give you all of these different options. So like here's 2 different versions of Hymn of Light and Thanksgiving for Light. So as you're planning this kind of custom service, it puts this all into a really easy to use format. So what we have done here at CPH is as we're building Creative Worship, we use the tools within here. So going back to my worship resources, that is one way that you can go and add new things. So if we go to new and we'll call it reading, and we'll go into type, there's reading, and you can have shared roles and other things. Choose the proper source, so maybe just from all readings or like Old Testament, it would suggest that. We'll go ahead and save that. As we go back here into planning, and in fact, let me go back to the calendar and I'll do that first one we selected. And I didn't give that a title. If I go to insert a reading, this is where I should then be able to go and put that in. Yep, right there. So that's another way of doing the readings, but that takes a little bit more work, not too much more than that. So you can add those different readings in, but that's what I really like about showing off Creative Worship, is that it has that for you already in place. All right, so those are some various ways that you can plan a service using different elements outside the norm for a Sunday service. What we're going to get into next is what you do with it from there. So as you plan services, you probably have a process in place for Sundays. You might have every Sunday bulletin series for your covers, and then you export in that way. But come Thanksgiving, you may not have a cover for that. If you're using ESBS, our series, there's not a Thanksgiving cover included with that. Now, you could also just get a special occasion cover and print it out like normal, but you may want to do something a little bit different. Those services may not be as well attended, so you might not want to buy a whole pack. So let's go back here to November 23rd, day of Thanksgiving. We'll go ahead and we already planned the service. Did we get the closing hymn? We didn't do prayers of the church either. That's okay. Yeah, we've got, we don't have a closing hymn here. That's not part of the liturgy. So there you go. We'll just go out to the bulletin view where we can plan it. So it's got our custom elements in here. Let's go ahead and actually delete the second communion statement. That's a there we go. That's a rubric. We'll just get that out of there. I don't need 2 in there. All right, so now as we go to plan it, if you're not familiar with how to export a bulletin, you've got a number of different options for what the formatting looks like. So here we've got Come You Thankful People Come. We could change that to be the melody printed out just by clicking this melody button up there. You can also change the number of stanzas. Maybe you're only singing 1, 2, and 4. Click the stanzas button, deselect stanza 3, Click OK, and it reduces it to 1, 2, and 4, and even puts this little note in here that it's 1, 2, and 4. So as you go through here, you have those options. And the styles are all of our default styles. So the theme here, UI default, you could change it to the Creative Worship one, which relies heavily on the Arial font family. You could also go and do a new one. So if we go to Edit Style Sheets and click New, there's Christ Lutheran Church. We could call this Special Occasion. And so maybe for this special occasion, you are doing something that has a little bit more style to it. So like Confession, Absolution, that serves there as your heading, and we'll put Lobster in there. Lobster is a kind of a script-like thing, script-like font. And then maybe we'll go in here and do Roboto is always my favorite one. I'm going to use a different one, I think. I'm going to use PT Sans. And we'll do that throughout here. So as I go through, I can select these different fonts. And, oops, I hit Enter too soon. If you hit Enter, it'll close everything up. But there we go. You can start to see that it's looking a little bit different. You don't want to use too many different fonts as you go, but we'll go ahead and put a few more in here. You still want it to be readable, of course. And there's many fonts out there that aren't readable. All right, we'll go ahead with that. And maybe you want to change the color of it if you're printing in color. We could go to a nice like harvest color brown for the header. And then maybe for these captions, go to a kind of maroon color. Click OK. So it looks a little bit more fall-like. If you're printing in color, that might add something to it. Then we can just go ahead and save as. We'll save it as our desktop, or on our desktop. All right, we'll let that export. Here we go. We'll open that up. Here it is. It's over on this side. Okay. So you'll see here that it exports everything that we've included, and I just picked a few styles there in different colors to show how you can be different, do something special with this occasion, but there's always more that you can do. So if we zoom out of this, you'll see that it goes page by page, and if we go to print it, up here under File and Print, going a little slowly here. Microsoft products always go slowly when I'm doing the live presentation. I think there's something about the internet connection. What I can do under Page Setup is I can turn this into a booklet. And so we can say bookfold is the goal. And we could always do 4 sheets per booklet. We'll do auto. And so then when we go to export it, it will print it in the right way that we can fold it. But you see here as we start with as we gather. I'm going to go back in and create a new page. And Control-Enter will start a new page. And we can copy and paste this and call this, oops, Day of Thanksgiving. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm typing in here. So Day of Thanksgiving, and I can go and insert a new image. I've saved some images from Creative Worship here, so I figure we can use one of those. There we go. Maybe I'll bump that up quite a bit. All right, so Day of Thanksgiving, and I can always add in another date in there, just so it actually has Thursday, November 23rd, 2017. So in a very short amount of time, I've created a new bulletin cover for my bulletin that's based off the same theme, that ties in with everything else, but is just something that I can print. So that's one other thing to consider as you're planning for midweek or festival services, the fact that your presentation might be a little bit different than normal. All right, going back here to Builder, I've got one more thing I want to show. So as you prepare to export it, we'll go to the presentation view. Now this is our default theme. This is taking the exact order of service you compiled for Thanksgiving, but puts it in a PowerPoint format. And you see As We Gather has a number of different slides. And it works, it's not thematic at all. So we're going to go ahead and create a new theme, and we'll call this one Thanksgiving. And as we look at this, the caption, we're going to go back up to the different styles so that it matches the bulletin. So lobster is what we're going to pick for the captions. And then the body copy is going to be PT Sands. Let's see how that looks. There we go. It's starting to look better. And then we'll go back here up into Edit Templates and do a background image. And I have in here, I think that's the one I want. Nope, that's not what I want. I was wrong with the wrong date. Here we go. We have this autumn colored, what we call digital pyramids. So see those colors? So this is starting to look a little bit more thematic. Then we'll go up here, Edit Slide Template. We can change the color and size on that. It's 42 right now. If we go to 48, that'll make it bigger, and we'll go and we'll do that same kind of dark, kind of fall-like color there. All right, and then we'll do the rubrics. And we'll make them PT Sands as well. And we'll make those that burgundy color. There we go. Click OK. Oops, seems to be taking a second. Or more than a second. That happens sometimes as I go. Well, I do apologize. This is taking far longer than I would like. There we go. So now as we update our slides, we can see that the color's in place, and that even as we get into, let's see if we can find a rubric. Yeah, the sign of the cross, that's in that same color scheme that we were using before. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and switch back into my presentation. So we talked about creative worship elements. If you're interested in learning more about creative worship, you can go to music.cph.org/creative worship. That is available to, for purchase, and gives all these great resources for each service, including special occasion services. A little bit about copyright management. I mentioned before I was going to talk about that. So when we created Lutheran Service Builder, before, let me go back a second. That was my first post. Before Lutheran Service Builder, we didn't have to worry too much about copyrights, because when you purchased a hymnal, you're purchasing the right to use that in the church. When we created Lutheran Service Builder, we introduced both a problem and a solution. By the fact that we now allowed you to print things like hymns that were copyrighted, but by providing Lutheran Service Builder, we also pay for those copyrights as part of your potential contracts with the hymn license. And as we, so that allows churches to print copyrighted materials, provides that automatic reporting. As you think about these special occasions, you may have special music that you put in here. You'd be able to track that copyright with using these different hymns and putting that copyright, if you've purchased it and you want to include it in here, you can do that within Lutheran Service Builder. So that also allows us to provide statistics. So if I switch back over to Builder for a second, go into Service Planning, and go to this hymn of the invocation. Under Stats, you can see when it has been used, how often it's been used, upcoming uses, and all of that. So that's a great way to really use the tool for multiple things, not just copyrights, but also statistics as well. All right, so why is this important? Well, it's a seventh commandment issue. As you think about things that are not as straightforward, you're not taking something from a store, you're not stealing in the traditional sense, but you're stealing intellectual property if you're using hymns without the permission, or songs or worship materials. And so that's why we put this in here as one of the great tools of Lutheran Service Builders that lets you not get around that, but properly pay for the copyrights. It also provides that compensation to copyright holders so they can continue to produce great music for the church. All right, before we go too much further into questions, in fact, I don't have any questions in the queue. I did notice that my audience view is paused again, so I'm hoping that it's following along with me. If not, I do apologize. But if you are new to Lutheran Service Builder and you'd like to get started, you can download a free trial at lutheranservicebuilder.com. I'm also going to put my contact information up on the screen there. You can reach out to me or one of our software consultants. And if you have any questions at this time, now would be a good time to go ahead and drop that in. Like I said, we don't have any right now. I know this was pretty straightforward for today. But yeah, if not, I'll give that another minute or so. Otherwise, I do want to thank you for attending today, or thank you for watching the recording after the fact. I do appreciate you being here, and I hope this information was helpful to you as we get into this season of special occasions in the church year. It can become a little complicated to manage all of that, and hopefully you'll see that Lutheran Service Builder can help you manage that. All right, so seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, and thank you again for being here today. And if you have any other questions, or if you have any questions, I should say, please don't hesitate to reach out at my contact information provided. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.